Welcome to the first episode of God and Man. I'm your host, Sam, and I'm glad that you can join me. In today's episode, I just want to share a bit of my story so you can get to know me better. In the next episode, I want to look at identity. So identity as men and how we find our identity, and particularly how you find it in two types of groups, the oppressed and the oppressor. In the third episode, I want to look at some influential voices in the world and how they engage with masculine identity and the things that they have to say and the things that we should listen to and the things that we shouldn't. In the fourth episode, I want to look at social media. What are some good things you can use it for? And what are some detrimental things about it in terms of mental health, pornography, things like that. And the last episode for this season, I want to look at wisdom, particularly knowledge of the past, like history, past events, war, things like that, and the experience. So things that have happened in your own life. And how does that contribute to gaining wisdom and where we find real wisdom? And so throughout all of these episodes, I want us to spend time looking at Jesus, looking at who he is and what he has to say about these particular aspects of our lives. So that's what's in store for the first season. But let's just dig into today's episode, which is my story. Now, I'm 27, so my story is not huge, but it's full of some fun stories that I'm sure I'll share throughout other episodes as well. But I think the best place to start would be with my parents, because we all come from our parents and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So for me, my dad, he was born here in Australia. So was my mum on the East Coast. And he was a bodybuilder growing up. He also played in a band, a very cool bloke. But he also was the son of a magistrate, so he was always moving around. And he found himself getting bullied because he was always the new kid in school. And so he learnt to defend himself, learnt some martial arts, and he's a tough bloke. And so, because he loved his martial arts, he got me and my brother into it, and we absolutely love martial arts. I love it. I've studied like 3 or 4 for collectively 5 or 6 years. But anyway, he also worked real hard, worked a part-time job, full-time job in retail. And after, I think it was in his late 20s, maybe early 30s, decided to go to uni, train as a nurse, and then did his master's in nursing as well. And yeah, very clever guy, very clever. Sometimes to his detriment as well, but only that he always thinks he's right. But I love him dearly. But my mum, again, very, very lovely woman, very kind-hearted. She had a tough time growing up as well. She made friends, but there was also people who treated her fairly poorly and struggled with depression in her later teens as well, which has stuck with her whole life, which I only found out about later in life as well, which was, tricky, because it was like, well, if I knew her earlier, I'd love to be able to help any way I could with that. But anyway, she went into nursing as well. So I think that's where they, mum and dad met, was at uni, studying nursing. My mum then went into data management and was there still is for many years, and has many great accomplishments in her work life as well. A big aspect of her life growing up, for both mum and my dad, but it was a little bit different in terms of what church and experience with religion looked like growing up for them. Mum grew up with pretty hard teaching around what kids and women do in church, whereas my dad grew up in Anglican church on the coast. And he said at one point he wanted to be an altar boy and go into ministry, but obviously that never really turned out. And so, that's my parents, right? So that's kind of like I'm a mix of these two. Mum's very kind-hearted. Dad, very strong-willed man. Yeah, so I feel like I'm a bit of a mix of the two. So I was born and raised on the east coast of Australia, where we had plenty of beaches. My favourite beach, probably Bar Beach. second maybe Merewether. But if you grow up on the coast, you spend a good chunk of your time at the beach. But funny enough, when people ask me, you're from the coast, you must love surfing. I don't, but I do love going to the beach. But it needs to be very contextual in that when you're from the coast, people who love to go to the beach go there every day. And if they're surfers, they're waking up at 4 a.m., 3 a.m. to get there to get a surf in before work and stuff like that, catch the swells. I mean, I'm like, yeah, I like going to the beach. I might go on every weekend or something. But yeah, when people ask me, do you love the beach? I'm like, well, I guess, but not as much as other people I know. So yeah, it was always very interesting comment I'd get. But I also had a bunch of hobbies as well. Love mountain bike riding, some downhill as well, bit quicker. I have a mate used to ride, and every now and then we still do. I have so many stacks. My mate was really good, and I was getting better, and so he'd always make me like do stuff that I wasn't comfortable with. And I'm very thankful for that, to be completely honest. I feel like he really grew my risk-taking aspect of me. He was always just making me take more risks. You kind of need mates like that in your life to just push you to do really, I don't want to say stupid, but maybe sometimes very stupid things. I also love gaming as well. Gaming is a big part of my life. I've reduced how big a thing it is in my life over time. I think there was a point which I'll probably talk about later, and maybe in another episode as well. It'd be a good topic. But yeah, it take up a lot of my time. So now it's kind of just a side hobby kind of thing that I like to do with mates and can catch up and just to do something together. So I think it's actually a really healthy thing at the moment, which is good. But I also love playing sports. I basically play anything, but I've played loads of soccer growing up. Since I was 5, I've been playing soccer. There was maybe a few years in there where I was not playing, and played some senior soccer, which was, yeah, there's some fun stories in there. Cricket as well. A few seasons of junior cricket, a few seasons of senior cricket. It's a good time. You learn a lot of patience in cricket. It's one of those sports where you're not constantly on the go, but you're chasing the thrills. There's moments of ecstasy in cricket when you're bowling and you get a batter out, like the euphoria from that moment, it's so great, and you're trying to chase the next one. Whereas you're a batter, you need to be a little bit more patient, and it's more like the accolades you get from a long innings as a batter. So it's interesting, the difference between a batter and a bowler and what satisfies you when you play cricket, very different. And a little bit of basketball as well. Played a bunch casually, and I've started playing most recently in a comp. But yes, that's a little bit about the peripheral things in my life, I guess. Growing up, there was Christianity at home. So some people, they grow up and it's never really talked about. At home, for me, it was, particularly Easter and Sundays. Not Sundays, sorry. Easter and Christmas. Easter and Christmas was talked about quite a bit. The purpose of these holidays is because of Jesus, because of his birth, because of his death and resurrection. And there was Sundays. So Mum did take me and my brother to church every Sunday. She was a very committed Christian. Dad, on the other hand, would say that he can be a Christian on his own. At this point in my life now, I disagree with that. Anyway, I think that's a topic for another episode as well. Dad didn't really go, but Mum took me and my brother every Sunday growing up. But eventually high school comes around. My dad doesn't go to church. Why would I? Young blokes do what their dad does, so I didn't go. And really, what I was taught at home as well, the purpose of life, it wasn't to live for Jesus, he governs and guides everything I do. That wasn't really my purpose. My purpose that I grew up, inherited, learnt, whether my parents meant to teach this to me or not, it's what I heard and learnt, was that I get a job, get a wife, a house, have a family, all of those things. Like, you need to tick all these boxes in life, and that is what the purpose of your life is for. That is what brings happiness. So high school was, I don't know, there's loads of fun stories and loads of great things that go on there. But towards the end of high school, ended up in a relationship that was, I say long term, like it was a bit over a year. So it was a committed relationship. And you start thinking, particularly if it's the first person, and it's kind of like the first person you fall in love with or something like that. You think it's going to be forever or whatever. And it wasn't. It wasn't. So we broke up. It was pretty heartbreaking. But then also at the same time, well, maybe like 6 months later, kind of failing uni. Not sure if they're related or not, but I mean, possibly. But I wasn't really studying at uni anyway. Like, I was just banking on pure inherent talent instead of actually studying. So yeah, it was, and it wasn't failing every course, but failing enough that it was just kind of, yeah, annoying. And at the same, and I was talking about gaming, like I loved to game. It brought me happiness. So why would I study hard and work for a job that sounds kind of boring? Why wouldn't I just game and just do the thing that makes me happy? So that's kind of what it did, right? But at some point I realized I probably needed to do something with my life, not just game. And so I decided to sign up for the Army Reserves, which is in Australia like part-time army, where you don't work full-time, where they basically own your soul, I like to say, where they just send you wherever they want and do whatever they want with you. Army Reserves is part-time, which allows you to choose the jobs that you get to work and things like that. But you still, when you do that, you're working with full-timers and you got to be very regimental and work with them. That was a great time and lots of stories in there that I can tell at a later time as well. But yeah, during, I think it was about the first year kind of working as an Army Reservist, a mate of mine invited me to church, and it met on the uni campus as well. And I knew my mate and I'd been to church growing up, so I was never adverse to going to church. Unlike these days, the world's changed in that people haven't grown up somewhat engaged in church like I was growing up. They've never been, and even their parents have never been. And so that's a massive thing for people. But at the same time, it's interesting. I think there's going to be a generation of people who go, oh, my parents have told me not to go to church. I've never been. I'm kind of interested. What's going on there? And so they come along. And so I think for some people, it's going to be a roadblock. But for other people, it's actually an intriguing thing. This thing that I've been told not to look at, not to go to. It's kind of like this, yeah, don't touch that. And they want to touch it. So I went along to church and I walk into this lecture theatre. I wasn't really sure what to expect. And I was astonished. I walked in and saw 300 people my age, like 19, 20s, in this room about to be in a church service. My experience of church growing up was at least people 40 plus. That is who went to church. And so when I walked in this room and saw so many people around my age, I was like, oh, I thought this was just a thing for like old people. It was old and outdated, and yeah, it just blew my mind. Yeah. But anyway, so that moment didn't convert me. It didn't change my mind entirely, but it blew my conceptions out of the water when I walked into that church. But for me, yeah, it wasn't one particular moment that made me go, yeah, that's it. That's when I became a Christian. It happened over time for me. So that first Sunday, and kept coming back more because I'm like, no, this is intriguing. I want to know what it is that they're saying the purpose of life is. Because for me at the time, I'd kind of had mine blown out of the water. I thought I needed to get a good job, and here I was just working part-time Army Reserves, and I just quit uni basically, and my long-term relationship, which I thought could turn into something more, fell apart. My entire purpose for my framework for what I thought the purpose of life was fell apart. Here on this Sunday was hearing that the purpose of life wasn't going to be found in these things. And so I wanted to know what they were talking about. So as I dug into it more, probably over a span of about 12 months, I was looking at the Bible's reliability was a big thing. I loved science. So I was at uni doing a science teaching degree because I love science. I loved that empirical method of just studying things, figure out what's true, what's not. I think a lot like that. I'd love a lot of things to be black and white, but I'm learning things are a lot more grey than we'd like them to be. But there are black and whites. There are. And so looking at the Bible's reliability was a big thing for me. And came to the conclusion it's actually quite reliable. Actually, there's no other historical text in history more reliable than the Bible. So if you're going to claim that the Bible is not historically reliable, good luck believing anything happened in history, because the Bible's the most reliable text you're going to get. So anyway, I learned that it was very reliable. And I was like, okay, so if I can trust what it says, someone encouraged me to look at the Gospels, to look at what did Jesus say, what do his disciples present him as in the Gospels? And they present him as God. They present him as God, the one who rules over everything, who created everything. That is who Jesus is. And in the Gospel Mark, in the first chapter, Jesus says that the kingdom has come, the kingdom of God. Repent and believe. That is what Jesus said. That is the call for everyone. And that was the call for me. And so over the 12 months that I was looking into this, at some point, I realized it was true. I realized that his incarnation, that God became man in Jesus, that he died, that he resurrected from the dead, never to die again. At some point, I believed that. I believed it. And so I repented and was saved. And since then, life's changed. Life has changed a lot. In the first few years of becoming a Christian, there were two big things that I needed to work on and struggled with. One was porn and one was drunkenness. Drunkenness in particular, I'll talk about here, because later I want to talk about porn on an episode about social media. But yeah, I loved sinking loads of alcohol, loads of beers. These days I can barely drink 2 or 3 without feeling tipsy, but yeah, a massive drunkard. And it was hard because I had a handful of mates from school that I loved to just spend time with, and we'd hang out at his place and drink loads, bring over a 6-pack, we'd have maybe like a slab of beers. And if you're not sure what a slab is, it's like 24 standard beers. So yeah, it was massive drunkard, and I used to hang out with my mates and we'd drink beers. And so now I wasn't drinking as much. They were asking questions and I was sharing a bit of what it meant for me to become a Christian now that I was convicted I shouldn't be getting drunk anymore. Eventually those friends kind of stopped inviting me places, stopped hanging out with me, which sucked. But it was the price I had to pay to submit to Jesus as my king. Otherwise, I would have been submitting myself to the opinions of man rather than the opinions of God. And so, yeah, porn as well. That's a massive one. I would say I was probably addicted to it. We watched lots of it growing up throughout high school. Taught that's what every young bloke was doing it. So I was like, oh, well, okay. But yeah, really struggling and learning to put that off. And even like in recent years, like it's not like, so became a Christian 4 years and then ended up at Bible college. I think even in the 2 years leading up to coming to Bible college, there was so much growth in that area as well. Not watching the hardcore stuff, but then also social media. And this is in that future episode I want to talk about. Social media. There's a lot of soft-core stuff on there that is just as harmful. And it's just a gateway into lapsing back. But anyway, turning from sin to righteousness as well. So I think the selflessness of giving up what's good for me and helping others was huge. An aspect of that of what it was like learning to serve at church. Like the first ministry I ever did, just on a random kids team working with young kids. And I've never worked with young kids before in my life. And I won't lie, I was a little bit scared. I was like, I don't work with kids much at all. are they going to eat my face off? Like, but it was actually really good. It was really good. I'm glad that someone actually took the courage and invited me to do it. So it taught me a lot of selflessness, particularly for kids, because they can't give anything back to you. So you might do something for a mate because, you know, they can give you something back in return. They might come and help you later when you need help. But kids are never going to do that. Never. And so it's a real act of selflessness, investing in kids, teaching them, raising them. It's a very selfless act. But then also self-control. I think that's a big aspect of learning to control yourself. Now, I think in the two areas of, I was talking about porn and drunkenness, yes, definitely need your self-control. But more than that, just anger. I inherited a bit of hot-temperedness and needing to learn to control that and not getting as frustrated at a lot of the little things in life was a big thing as well. And then lastly, was telling other people about Jesus, about the thing I had come to realize was true. Because I grew up with a whole bunch of mates who weren't Christians at all. And I wasn't a Christian at the time either. And knowing that all of them live the way I used to live, chasing empty, hollow dreams that aren't true, that aren't the real purpose of life. And so I was convicted that I wanted to spend my days telling people about the reality that God's kingdom has come and it's time to repent and believe in the King who's brought the kingdom. And so I spent 2 years doing a ministry apprenticeship where I got to try my hand at full-time ministry for 2 years. And it was one of the greatest 2 years of growth in my life, where I had a trainer who invested in me for those 2 years, meeting up with me weekly, just helping me to grow, first and foremost, in my character, to make me more like Jesus, to help me do that. I can never really express how thankful I was for those 2 years. And many other ways I was grown, but I think that was particularly the big one. And so now I find myself 2 years after that apprenticeship at college in my third year at theological college, looking down the barrel of going into full-time ministry myself, where I'll be training up and encouraging and raising up young men and women to do the same. And at some point, hopefully, I pray that I'd be sending people to college. This is my story. There's many other details, but I'm sure in future episodes I'll be able to share more of them. But for now, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode of God and Man.